Hi, I'm Sophie and welcome back to Muse of Bookmans. Today I thought that I would give the Booktube newbie tag a go, as I'm a fairly new channel and my lovely friend over at Well Read and Half Dead tagged me in it, so I thought that I would give it a go. So this tag was created by Brenda C. I've got the questions here on my laptop and let's just jump into it, I guess. So the first question is, why did you start this channel? And really the honest answer is I just want to talk about books. I was at a really intense, high demand job for ages, which I left at the beginning of this year or end of last year, and now I've just got a bit more time and space to do things that I want to do. I've been watching Booktube since about 2011, so a long time. And I've always wanted to participate, but I've just never had the time, or I guess the courage to do it myself. So I thought that now might be the perfect time to give it a go. I basically just wanted to catalogue my reading journey and to meet other people who also like books and to talk about them back and forth. Basically entirely a narcissistic friend making exercise. What are some fun and unique things that you can bring to Booktube? So my background is probably a little bit different to a lot of booktubers. One, I've worked in the Australian writing industry for 5 years. My previous role was working a lot with writers, so there's lots of writers that I know. I also got to do lots of working with publishers, which was really cool for certain programs that my old work ran. So I know a lot about the industry. I actually ran an industry advice service, so I know most things about how the publishing industry works in Australia. I also have lots of wonderful author friends, which is really cool. So that part of expertise is probably a little bit different to what most people have, so hopefully I can shed insight if people have questions about how the industry works. And a lot of that is applicable overseas as well, so most of my knowledge is Australian centered, but I generally know how to apply that overseas and when it does and doesn't apply. So if you're a writer and you are looking to get published, I totally get in touch because I have lots of suggestions and advice. That was basically my old job, was telling people how to get published, so get in touch. I also have a literature degree, so I love books, I love reading them, I love reading widely. I read everything from thrillers to classics to YA to fantasy, and I'm pretty critical about everything that I read. I have a fairly good understanding of the canon, but there's a lot of things that I haven't read, and that's fun. The other weird thing about me is that I was raised in a super religious family, and so that means that I haven't seen many movies because most of our media was very monitored. There's tons of things that if I haven't read, I have no idea what they're about, so I don't know what Lord of the Rings is about, I don't know the storyline to Star Wars, I don't know Titanic, etc. But with books it's really cool because it means that I can experience the classics as they were written and how the author intended before movies got in. So things like Lord of the Rings and Stephen King books and things that were really big movies based off books, I can read the book without having any knowledge. And lastly, I'm also a bookseller, so my everyday job is reader advisory, which means I have a little bit of a different attitude. I don't look at books as being good or bad. I look at what the right fit is and whether that's me or whether that might be you. So most of the time when I'm talking about books, I try to describe them in a way so that way you would know if it would be a good fit for you. And I'll always explain why something didn't work for me. If it doesn't work, I'll never lie about a book, but I will always make sure that I articulate the elements of the book, because I think there are some books that just don't work for me but would work for lots of people. There's some classics that I don't love that millions of people have loved, so I don't ever think one person saying whether it's good or bad is going to be a useful thing, but I think me saying why it worked or why it didn't and what the elements are can inspire you to pick it up, even if it wasn't something that worked well for me. And likewise, if it's something that did work for me, I'm going to tell you why. I'm not just going to be like, I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. Though I probably will ramble a little. But I like to take pride in being like, this is why I love something and this is why it worked for me. That's why I did a literature degree. That's why literature fascinates me so much. What are you most excited for about this new channel? I'm just excited to meet people and share content and go on adventures and projects and do big I'm gonna read this many books relating to this topic and then filming it all. It's a combination of reading really widely and as much as I can and doing new experimental things and trying new things there, and also hopefully making friends and meeting new people in the community who also love books, because bookish people are the best people. What book or series got you into reading? I've always loved reading. I know that there's like this story. When I started my like kindergarten, it was at a school that had never existed before, so we were like foundation students, and so they interviewed all the students, and you like had your interview with the principal, and then they were only taking like 100 kids, so they would over like kindergarten to year 6, so they were interviewing tons of people, and then they were letting them know like a few weeks later whether or not they would get in. Somehow the principal ended up saying something, and then I just went on this really long tangent about how much I loved reading and how this was my favorite book, and it was Laura's Star, which was like a picture book that was out at the time. And then the principal just looked at my parents and said, okay, she's got a spot, you don't need to wait. So I have always loved books. I've always been obnoxious. I've always been the Hermione in every room. I'm self-aware at least. I did sort of dip out of reading a little bit in high school, but that was because I stopped wearing my glasses and it gave me headaches. So I guess the book that got me back into reading after I took that tiny break was probably, it was a combination of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen and Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. The book that got me into writing was Harry Potter. I got very into the fan fiction world, and there's still fan fiction out there under a very fake name that no one will ever know, has weirdly sexual undertones for it being written by a 6-year-old on the internet. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? I would just want to talk to them about their favorite books. I would just want to be like, okay, cool, so you love this book, why did you love it? What made you? What was the thing that got you? Like, why do you think she's so good at what she's doing? I just think it's so interesting when people talk about why something works. And I guess that's probably going to be a focus of my channel, is being like, why? What challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? I think finding an audience and finding that community, like tapping into the like community that already exists, is probably going to be the hardest thing, but I think it looks like a pretty open and welcoming community, so I'm hoping that is the case. I also think that at least at the moment time is like a little tricky for me because we're opening a new bookstore at my job, and that has just been exhausting. When did you start reading? I've already kind of answered that, but always, like for as long as I can remember, I've always been reading. I used to get like books confiscated from me in class because I was reading too much. I think like the 5th Harry Potter book was just lived at the back of the classroom for like a term. So like always, but there was probably a break between like when I was like 12 and 16. Where do you read? So I listen to lots of audiobooks on my way to and from work and while I'm doing chores and things. I also read a lot in bed and on my like comfy couch spot. What kind of books do I like to read? I like to read a bit of everything. So I love classics. I especially love like modernism. I love like Mrs. Dalloway. I really want to read more Virginia Woolf. I love Austen. I also love YA. I think YA is lots of fun. I think I like to read lots of YA fantasy. I've got lots of friends who read lots of YA fantasy, so it's fun to read it and like be part of the conversation, and some of it's amazing. I also really like horror and crime and thriller. I'm probably like the thriller expert at my work. It's probably like the area, so I've been reading lots of that, especially lately. And I tend to read lots of Australian authors as well, especially if I'm going to events or if I'm running events. And I like general fiction, and I like women's fiction, and I like magical realism is like a favorite. I love historical fiction. I just love a bit of everything, and I think the most fun thing for me about reading is that you can read a bit of everything and not get bored, because as soon as you finish one thing you can start something completely different. So I try to keep my reading tastes as varied and diverse as possible, both in terms of who's writing them and the things that they contain. So that was a long rambling rant. I'm just really excited about this journey, and I'm really excited to meet all of you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
Honestly, this is going to be the hardest part about starting a new booktube channel, because she's so needy. Look at that. Look at that.